Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our class today. Today, we're going to be talking about how to spot a dangerous tree, and our speaker is Peter Jenkins. The agenda for today, we're going to start with a little introduction, a presentation by Peter, and then there'll be opportunities for questions and answers. My name is Michelle Diaz. I'm the Education Program Manager at Trees Atlanta, and I'll be the moderator for today's presentation. Trees Atlanta mission is to protect and improve Atlanta's urban forests by planting, conserving, and education. We offer education events through the year, and because of the current situation, we're hosting them virtually now. So we invite you to take a look at our calendar and join us for more classes. And if you have a question for the speaker or a comment for me or the speaker, please use the chat or the Q&A tool to direct questions for the speaker. I'll be moderating the chat and the Q&A, and then I'll be sharing the questions with the speaker at the end of the presentation. After the event, you will be receiving a survey email. And because this virtual education is something that's still very new for Trees Atlanta, we will love your feedback. Please let us know what could we improve, what we did good, and if you have any other suggestions for any other classes that we should be offering. I'd like to highlight two upcoming events. They are going to be on Saturdays at 10 a.m. on June 13 and June 27. And one of our volunteers, Scott Braslow, is going to be talking about how to move from lawns to natives and how to identify invasive species in our homes. They are both going to be virtual and very interactive. If you are interested, visit treesatlanta.org/calendar and you'll see more information about the classes, more classes, and then the opportunity to register. Also, I encourage you to follow us on our social media and to sign up for our newsletter. Today's speaker is Peter Jenkins. He's an International Society of Arboriculture certified, and he is a tree risk assessment qualified arborist. We're very excited to have you, Peter, and thank you for joining us.
Okay, my name is Peter Jenkins. I want to thank Trees Atlanta for inviting me to speak to you today. I want to start off to say that I am a tree hugger. I really like trees. I climbed trees as a child. I was the tree climbing person of my family. And fortunately, as a child, both my parents were botany majors, so I was around the scientific world of plants and trees from a very, very early time. I love to teach people about trees, and I love helping people save trees. That is my passion. So let's get started, and we'll pull up the first slide. Okay. Okay.
How do you do the first slide?
Okay, we're getting a little challenged here.
Hang on.
Hang on.
Hang on. It doesn't want to. There, try that. There.
Okay, here we
Yes,
go.
we see it. We're good.
This is my first exposure to this kind of a communication, and I'm so happy with we have this kind of communication. So when you're assessing a tree, when you're looking at a tree closely, I've broken tree assessment into 4 different zones. And the reason I've broken it into 4 different zones is because there's so much information about a trees and how they live and the different parts of a tree. You sort of get inundated with the variables of looking at a tree. So I've broken it into sections to make it a little bit easier to go through looking at a tree with a progression of subjects in each one of them. So the 4 zones is the tree as a whole unit, looking at the tree from afar, the ground, and 3 feet up the trunk. So when I say the ground, that would be at the drip edge of the tree, the very ends of the branches, up to the tree, and then 3 feet up the trunk. And then zone 3 would be the trunk itself, looking straight up the trunk. You're looking at for cavities, how the branches are attached to the tree. And then we're looking at the canopy, and this would be the smaller branches and the foliage. So let's get started here. Zone 1, the tree as a whole. And this is looking at a tree a little far away. You're not underneath the tree. Sometimes you don't get that opportunity, but whenever you have the opportunity, you get a lot of information. So looking at this tree as a whole unit, there are things to notice. The most obvious thing to notice is the leaves are brown on this tree. This was a stunning, beautiful white oak tree. And they got to building walls and driveways and new houses around this tree. And the tree could not accept the changes. Cut roots, the soil fills, the compacted soil, on and on and on. Old trees are like old people. They don't adapt to changes. And of course, when you build around a tree, there's a lot of changes, and older trees have a lot of difficulty. So this is looking at the tree as a whole unit. I noticed there's a little bit of a lean to the right. There's a little bit less branches on the left side. More than likely, there used to be a tree growing on the left side of that tree. That's why there's more foliage on the right side. And if I was to really wanted to get my research down, I would, when I came close to the tree, if I wanted to verify there might have been a tree growing behind it, I would look around the ground. I look for stumps. I look for depressions in the soil. There's a lot of detective work you can do when it comes to assessing a tree, really getting into why a tree has decided to do certain things. Then there's the leaning tree. So leaning trees, when I assess risk in trees at residential properties and such, one of the big topics that comes up is my tree is leaning. And I would say there's a large majority, probably 50% of the trees growing out in the forest or in your yard have a lean. Some of the leans are significant, some of the leans are insignificant. The thing that you need to learn is to try to get into the mind, so to speak, of a tree to decide, why is this tree leaning? Now we're going to do a little bit of detective work. So first off, before we do the detective work, we want to, in the world of tree risk assessment, we always talk about target. What is the tree going to hit if this leaning tree falls over? And when it comes to a leaning tree, it's pretty easy to figure out what the tree is going to hit. And all you have to do is go right behind the lean, opposite the lean, and just like sighting down a gun barrel, you sight down this trunk, and then you'll be able to see pretty clearly what the tree is going to hit. If there's high target value, that would be like your house, or maybe it's your parking area where you park your cars. That's high target value. Low target value is your backyard. So you always want to keep these things in consideration. So let's take a look at this tree right here. This is a white pine. You need to know a little bit about tree species when you're doing this detective work. And if you know about white pines, you know that white pines generally, they live in the forest, and generally they grow straight up. And so you look at this white pine going like, that's sort of strange. And what makes this picture even stranger is you see a lot of branches growing on the left side of the tree. Now, if this tree was growing close to another tree, let's say there was a tree right behind it on the left side, then there would be less branches on the left side and more branches on the right side. Why is that so? Because trees always want to put their branches where there's sunlight. They're like tiny photocells. Trees eat sunlight. So you want to sort of do that detective work and try to figure out, well, why did a tree put branches this way or that way? On this tree here, there's branches on both sides. And that makes me very, very suspicious as to why this tree is leaning. So here's the distinction. Is it a natural lean or is it an unnatural lean? So write this down. Is it a natural lean or is it an unnatural lean? This is very important. Okay, let's take a look. So let's go back. If it's an unnatural lean, then I will go look at the ground right at the soil line, and I'm going to be looking for cracked soil, raised soil. If the tree is starting to fall over, then then that's where I'll look. Now, this is all in zone 2. I just got a note from my wife and it says zone 2. So I think I'm jumping ahead of myself. So let's move on. I sort of get, when I see this picture here, I sort of get excited, actually. Okay. On the faraway look, I'm going to look at the tops of the trees. And on this tree here, these are dead tops. If I was directly underneath the tree, like in zone 2, looking straight up, or zone 3, looking straight up, I may not see all these dead tops. So again, in zone 1, looking at a tree from the far away look, I'm going to get more information about the tree itself, what's going on. And this will give me clues as I inspect closer. If I know there's dead tops in the trees, then I might be looking in other places to try to figure out, to do that detective work. Why is the tree doing this? Excuse me. Zone 2, the ground and 3 feet up the trunk. This is zone 2. So I'm going to walk towards the tree. Now, if I'm walking toward the tree, this is a safety thing. If I see a whole bunch of dead branches laying on the ground, so I'm walking up to the tree, so I'm going to go underneath the drip edge and to the trunk and up 3 feet on the trunk. So I'm walking up to the tree and I see a whole bunch of dead branches laying on the ground, then I'm going to stop right there because I have just been given a clue. There's dead branches on the ground. And very often there can be more dead branches up in the air. Well, so what does that mean? Well, maybe I might want to put on a helmet before I want to walk underneath this tree. Maybe before I walk underneath this tree, I might want to do a 360-degree walk around the tree, looking up into the tree, just to make sure that it's safe to walk underneath this tree. One of my personal friends who was a tree guy many years ago, he walked underneath the tree, and this guy was a nice guy. He was a tree worker. He walked underneath the tree to inspect a tree, and a big branch, it was cracked. It released from the tree, it fell, and it killed this guy right on the spot. He was inspecting the tree, and he was killed. So the point being is, when you have dead branches and hangers and stuff in the trees, they can fall down, so do be careful and walk around the tree before you go underneath the tree. Okay, so here we have a leaning tree, and this has an unnatural lean. If you look a little closer, you'll see the root plate opposite the lean is starting to stick up out of the ground. Sometimes you see soil cracks, sometimes you see the roots actually sticking up out of the ground. Now, this is a dangerous tree. Okay, so don't get too frisky and want to really investigate this tree and walk underneath this tree. This tree can let loose at any time. This is a high-risk tree. Now, if it's aimed at your house, that means it's got high target value. I have told people to move away from certain sides of their houses when I've seen a situation like this, where there's a big tree aimed at whatever side of the house it is. I say, if you're going to go back into your house, you want to stay on this side of the house, because if this tree lets loose prematurely, this is where it's going to hit. And all you have to do is look sight straight up the tree opposite the lean, and you'll get a good idea of where this tree is going to go if it lets loose. We have some girdling roots here. You can see this on the ground. This is where roots wrap around other roots. These are two small girdling roots. And sometimes they can be really large. And now if these girdling roots are wrapped around roots on a leaning tree opposite the lean, well, that increases the hazard effect, because it's essentially choking off some roots that are really need to be there to support the tree standing up. Now we have some mushrooms. So mushrooms growing on the trunk of the tree or the major root flares on a tree, that's not a good thing, because these mushrooms essentially digest the tree. They create decay, which creates weakness. So on this tree here, and the root flares, those are those big roots that come at the very, very base of the tree. There you go. Thank you very much. Okay.
Go back.
Okay. So root flares are on the trunk. These mushrooms can be up the trunk. They can be up into the canopy. They're usually on the ground. Now, you'll see a tool right next to this big fungus body. That fungus's name is Ganoderma. And this is a tool. The tool that you see here is called a resistograph. It's a tiny, tiny drill bit, 1/16 inch in diameter. It drills into the tree. It's a slightly invasive tool, tiny drill bit. It drills into the tree and it records the resistance to that drill bit going into the tree, and it comes out in a graph form, sort of like an EKG. So what I want to see in a normal tree, I want to see it spike up and down, up and down. That is a normal reading. When it flatlines mid-level, that means decay. When it flatlines at the very, very bottom, that means the tree is hollow. So that is the tool that I use. It's called a resistograph. And I use that when I see mushrooms. I usually will use a resistograph because I want to quantify the decay. Some people will use mallets and tap the tree, which has a limited use. You need to know what's really inside the tree. And a lot of these big oak trees are around houses because they planted these trees when the houses were built with the foresight of knowing that someday these are going to be big, beautiful trees. And large doesn't necessarily mean strong. So anyway, that's something to take in consideration when you're looking at older trees. Big trees, they're very heavy. And if you have mushrooms and stuff growing around, you have other problems, then you need to investigate further just so you know whether this tree is safe, especially if it's near your house. Okay, here's one of the very common trees, tree mushrooms. Inonotus striatus. I think that's how you pronounce it. I call one Inonotus striatus. That is a Latin name. I call that one of those out-of-town words. I really did not take Latin when I was in high school. So for you Latin people, please excuse me if I am not pronouncing it correctly. Now, it's this mushroom is very common. And when I say very common, it appears on trees from time to time. Once a mushroom starts on a tree, it's there permanently. So you can break that mushroom body off the tree, that mushroom is still inside the tree. This is the flowering part of the mushroom. So it's sort of like a flower, okay? And this one here is easy to identify is because it has little droplets. It's called an exuding mushroom. And they're actually, those little droplets are prismatic. They refract light. So they're actually very beautiful, but not the greatest thing to have on your tree. This mushroom attacks the roots. Okay. And these, now, when I see this mushroom, then I always have a bag in my vest. And these are the mushrooms that you take home to the table. I am a mushroom hunter, a very cautious mushroom hunter. But these are chanterelles, $30 a pound when you buy them in the supermarket. And sometimes in the springtime, I can get them for free. So there are good mushrooms to eat, and there's lots of bad mushrooms to eat. So if you're going to eat mushrooms, be really careful as to what you eat. Okay, now at ground level, we're still on zone 2, and we've looked at some of the mushrooms in the bottom of the ground, on the root flare, and now we're going to go up 3 feet up the trunk. So this is a cavity on the trunk, and by looking, so I'll pull out my detector magnifying glass, and I'm trying to figure out, I wonder what caused this wound. And so on this one here, this was a scrape wound. Now, what I mean by scrape wound is a tree fell and it scraped the side of this tree. And when you scrape the side of a tree, peel off bark, and that sort of like when you peel off bark on a tree, the bark is the skin of the tree. And so just like us, just like humans, the tree is going to try to seal that off. Any kind of a wound, it's going to, like a scab, with humans it's a scab, but a tree is going to lay down what they call reaction wood or a wound wood, and it's going to try to seal off that wound. So I can look at this wound, and just by the shape, I can tell that this was a scrape wound. A tree fell against this tree, and it has a little bit of seepage, and there might be a little bit of decay, but that's what caused it. Something fell against the tree. Right down at the bottom, there's a little bit of some seepage, and that's probably slime flux. And slime flux is a surface thing, and it usually doesn't kill trees. Very rarely does it kill trees. Sometimes it smells very stinky. That's called alcoholic slime flux. It actually ferments. The bar is open, and you'll see all kinds of insects: bees, wasps, hornets, butterflies. I've even seen squirrels go down and lap it up because it's alcoholic. So something interesting, very, very interesting to see. Okay, here's another mushroom. This is a really pretty one. This is Ganoderma lucidum, known as the 100-year mushroom. This is an herbal, and it's supposed to do good things for you. I tried it once, dried it out and crushed it up, and put it in some water, and there's a special way to do it. And folks, it don't taste good. It is nasty tasting. So I don't know. Anyway, it's a beautiful mushroom, and it's got just the color, the outside lip, and I get excited when I see this. When I see this mushroom, it usually grows on trees. Sometimes I see it on the anchoring roots a little bit away. This is not a good mushroom to have in the tree. If I saw this mushroom, I would probably want to drill the tree just to make sure that there's not extensive decay caused by this mushroom. Sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. That's why I drill. So I actually get an idea of what's there as opposed to guessing. It's much better to get good information as opposed to guessing. What I don't want to do is say, hey, you got a little tiny mushroom here. You need to take this tree down. It's going to kill you some night. Maybe not. Maybe it's just a minor occurrence of a mushroom. That's why you do the investigation work. Okay, we're still in zone 2. This is a multi-trunk tree. And whenever you have multi-trunk trees, you look at the shape of the connection. What
I
would
got
we?
it.
I'm being coached here with the mouse.
Keep
With the
going.
mouse. Okay, thank you. I got it. I got it. Okay, so mouse education. Here we go. All right. So you have a tight V right here. Tight V's are weaker than a U shape. So I look at the shape of the trunk unions, and I can sort of get an idea of how strong they are. Now you'll see a little bit of swelling right here, and the tree is telling me with the swelling right here at this trunk union that it's weak. So it's laying down more wood, reinforcing wood. Now, if it's flat from right here to right here, I call it flat chested. If it's flat chested, then maybe it's not so bad. But if this part really protrudes, this side here, and it protrudes out, the more it protrudes out, that tells me it's weak, and it's probably got included bark. Rather than real wood right down in through here, it's got a layer of bark, which is not strong at all.
Can you talk about the crack?
And the crack, they talk about the crack. This tree is in the process of splitting out. Okay, so you see that it's opening up. If it's a tiny crack, I'll pull out my pocket knife and stick it in. If the pocket knife blade sticks in, that's not good. This crack is so big, I could probably stick a pencil in there and probably go in fairly deeply. That's not good. That's not clear. Clear the what?
House.
Yeah. And again, you want to think about what the target is. So this one leans in this direction here, this one here. If it's towards the backyard, of course we don't want the tree to fall over, but it has a low target value. Now, if this tree was spun around and both of these face the house, then, well, that's a different story. Zone 3, this is the trunk. You're looking straight up the trunk. You're looking at the branches that are coming out of the trunk. And you're looking for cavities, you're looking for mushrooms, you're looking for different things. Okay, let's take a look at this. Okay, here, another codominant trunk, and there's the bulge right there. It's probably got included bark, a layer of bark going straight down, and so you can see a little bit of bulge. I've seen them really big, and sometimes I see them really flat. The flat ones are much better than the ones that protrude. Okay, I'm looking up the trunk, and this is very common in pine trees. This is called fusiform canker. It is a fungus. It's a very slow-acting fungus. So when there's pine trees on a property, or when I'm looking at pine trees, I always do a 360 walk when I'm looking up the trunk. And usually, when I'm looking at the trunk, if there's fusiform canker, yes, there is the canker itself. But if you look right here, notice how there's more wood right there. It sort of protrudes out. Sometimes it's on the other side. And here's what the tree is doing. The tree is saying, hey, I'm weak right here, so I'm going to lay down some more layers of wood to reinforce this weak spot. And so it's easy to see. It doesn't take a college degree to look up to see these areas. So here's the industry standard. If this fusiform canker, if it goes into the tree more than 33% of the trunk, then that's considered hazardous. If it's even deeper than that, then that is a hazardous tree. In a windstorm, this is where the tree is going to break. Right here. It can be at the very base of the tree. It can be midway up. It can be at the very, very top of a tree. I use binoculars when I look at pine trees. I do a 360 walk and I look straight up the trunk on pine trees. And sometimes I see these canker spots way up high in a tree. But what cues me off is the different form. First off, you have the cavity right there, and then I'll look for the difference of the trunk line. This one sort of bulges out and it's sort of easier to see. This is a trunk swelling, and at first sight you would think, ooh, this doesn't look too good. Well, and it's a good reason to slow down. And this tree here, I'm looking at the bark.
To identify the species.
Yeah, to identify the species. And it looks like a tulip tree. I'm looking at the very, very top, seeing the straight lines. This usually doesn't happen in tulip tree. Usually this is in the hardwood trees, like your oaks and stuff. And this is just a weird growth, an abnormal growth. What I would do is I'd probably bring out my mallet and tap it. And if it's not spongy and it's not soft, then I'm feeling better about that tree. If there's targets, see how it leans just a little bit. If there's a house over here, I might drill it once, opposite the lean. Whenever you drill a tree, you want to drill opposite the lean. That's your first drill. That's the most important side of a leaning tree, is the side opposite the lean. Okay, now we have lightning strikes. And lightning comes in different temperatures. A cold lightning strike would be about 50,000 degrees Fahrenheit. And you say, whoa, that's a lot. Yeah, it is a lot. Of course, that's a lot. However, a hot strike would be around 100,000 degrees Fahrenheit. So a cold strike will strip down the trees, strike right down the tree. A hot strike will actually blow the tree up, just completely disintegrate. All the bark comes off the tree, and sometimes it explodes and the thing just comes down. And that's a very, very hot strike. Not very common. It's usually cold strikes. So here we have a tulip tree. Tulip trees get hit more often than other species of trees because tulip trees carry more water. And water is a very, very good conductor of the electrical current. So that's one of the reasons they get hit more. Now here we have the pine tree. This is a cold strike, it comes down. What usually kills pine trees from a lightning strike is not the strike itself, it's usually the pine bark beetle. So we all know that pine has a very strong odor. You know, you've heard of pine sol, right? Very strong odor. These pine bark beetles, they're about a 1/16 inch in size. There's 3 or 4 different varieties of pine bark beetles. They're like catfish in a river, and they smell a wound on a pine tree. And if you have a long wound like a lightning strike, it's sending out a lot of odor, scent molecules, and they will follow the air currents and go right to the tree. And it's usually the pine bark beetle that kills the trees. Okay. So anyway, it's a pretty picture, but not necessarily something I want to happen to my tree. So on the pine bark beetle thing, usually you would, if you're really trying to save that pine tree, you'd spray it up. You'd have a professional come out and spray the whole tree, and you do that at least once a month. Don't do it yourself. First off, you're not going to have a spray that goes all the way to the top of the tree, and then and also too, you don't want to be dancing around with toxic chemicals. That's just not a good thing. So anyway, so that's lightning strikes. Sometimes like I said, it will blow a tree up, and believe me, you will know when it blows the tree up. Okay, this is, I'm still in zone 3. I'm looking at the trunk. This is an old pruning cut. And this cut was done at least 25 years ago. It's getting pretty close to closing itself off. Now, there's a hollow behind this. Now, this one here is a wet hole, meaning there's water when it rains. There's water that collects in there. Don't worry about the water collecting inside of a cavity. In the old days, we used to get concerned about water, standing water in cavities, and we used to put in pipes, drain pipes. And the scientists told us, stop doing that. You're not doing the tree any good. You're wounding the tree. And the standing water actually is a fungus retardant. because fungus needs oxygen, dry oxygen, not wet oxygen. So it actually inhibits fungus. So if you have standing water in the crotch of a tree or in a cavity like this, don't worry, you don't have to drain it out or plug it up or anything like that. So if this was a nesting cavity, then it would be dry on the inside. Nesting meaning squirrels, flying squirrels, raccoons, possums.
Birds.
What?
Birds.
Birds. Yeah, it could be birds too. So if it's a squirrel nesting cavity, I will look around the outside edges. If it's a nesting cavity that's currently being used, and on the outside edges, they'll gnaw. The squirrels will gnaw, and it'll be like a pink color. You'll be able to see the gnaw marks. That means it is an active nesting area. So anyway, if I was to do a tree inspection, I saw something, and you see a house right here. So there's a target. It's right next to the house. I would probably climb the tree and use a steel probe. I wouldn't use a resistograph. I would probably use a steel probe, and I'd stick it into that cavity and feel around just to see, how deep is this cavity? I would do that with a little bit of trepidation because there have been a few occasions where I got close to a cavity of this nature, and I learned the hard way that you want to, so I'm going to be right down here. I'm climbing up the tree. And I have a helmet on, of course, and I will tap with a carabiner right around the edges, like, anybody home? And I've had possums come out and stick their heads out and hiss at me, and I've had squirrels come after me. Now, I will get out of the tree when the squirrel's chasing me. Yes, I sure will. And but anyway, I would do that just to make sure it's not currently occupied. I will never put my nose against the hole to see if there's anything inside. Bad idea, very bad idea. How to get a nose job, looking in a cavity hole. Not real smart. Okay, here we have a crack in the trunk, and when I saw this, I went like, this is a fresh crack. If you look around the edges, right around the edges here, it's sort of pink. And that tells me it's a fresh crack. And so I pulled out my little trusty pocket knife, and I stuck it in, and it went all the way. And right behind over here, this tree has a lean, and right over there, underneath the lean, is a house. And I told the people that were underneath the leaning tree to move out until the tree is removed, because when the cracks get this deep, they can break at any time. The whole tree can fail at any time. Again, looking at target. If the tree fails, what's it going to hit? Okay, it's not rocket ship science. All right, here we have on the trunk, we're still on zone 3, this is a pine bark beetle attack. And so what you see around here, right there, right there, right there, those are what we call pitch tubes. And what a pitch tube is how it works. When the beetle drills into the tree, the pine tree says, oh, help, attack. Okay, so what it does, its strategy is to flow resin, sap, flow out as the beetle drills in, to flow out sap, and it tries to drown the beetle. And sometimes if it's a minor attack on the tree, sometimes that's a successful strategy, sometimes it's not. If this pine tree is in a state of a drought condition, pine tree, it may not have enough moisture to flow the sap out, and it may succumb to the beetles. So what do? Well, you can spray the tree up. Sometimes that works, but if you spray the tree up, you have to do it really early on, not in this state where these beetles, they're up underneath the bark, and the spray chemicals won't touch them. They're underneath the bark. Too late. So sorry. And here we have sawdust. You can usually see this around the base of the tree. Sometimes you see it in other parts of the tree. These are the ants, the carpenter ants. So people will bring me up to a tree and says, "This tree's got ants. This tree's got ants." I got news for you, folks. All trees have carpenter ants. So these are the big black carpenter ants. You can have an ant colony of hundreds of ants up in the tree, and that ant colony would be in a little dead branch, like maybe 2 or 3 feet long, 4-inch diameter. You could have hundreds of carpenter ants. Now, here's the deal about carpenter ants. Carpenter ants cannot cut into live wood, green wood. Too hard, can't do it. But what they can do is they can cut into and make breeding cavities, also known as galleries. They can be in the dead wood. That they can cut. So anyway, and then you have another kind of a frass. It's much finer in texture, and that will be your oak borers. So the ants will have a coarse frass sawdust, and then the oak borers, it'll be much finer sawdust. And usually always you see that at the base of a tree. Sometimes you see that in the bark, in the fissures of the bark. You see a little bit here and there. You have to look closely if it's on the bark of a tree. But it'll be real fine sawdust. It's very, very light in color because that's the sapwood, the lighter colored sapwood.
If the tree has borers.
If the tree has borers, well, if you catch it real early, you might be able to spray it up and save your tree. But again, borers, like ants, once they're up in the tree, they're pretty well protected, like just like the pine bark beetle. Once they're up underneath the bark, they're in the tree, they're pretty protected against sprays and stuff like that. So you have to catch them very early on, and that's difficult to catch them very early on because these are very small bugs. They're 1/16 of an inch. The big ones are 1/8 of an inch. They're hard to see. Okay, borers do kill trees.
They're not like carpenter.
Yeah, carpenter ants, they're sort of isolated on dead branches and spots and stuff like that. But the oak borers and some of the other borers that attack the hardwood trees, yeah, that's real serious. Usually you eventually will lose the tree. So, all right. This is a fungus. This is called hypoxylin canker. And this fungus usually starts at the very, very top of a tree and works down. How do you see it from the ground? First off, if the top of your trees are dead, had dead tops, I will bring out my birding binoculars and I will look very closely. And I'll be looking for where the bark falls off the branches. It usually starts in the high branches. If I see where the bark has fallen off the branch and I see these blotches, these blotch colors, this is the fruiting body of the fungus. The blotch colors can be white, they can be light tan, they can be black, multicolors. But that's the fruiting body of the fungus. If I see them in the very, very top of the tree, then I will probably prepare the homeowner and say, you're probably going to lose this tree. And then you might get the idea, well, what if you went up and just pruned out the dead branches, the infected branches? You'll probably slow the fungus down. This is a systemic fungus. It first comes by air. And then once it gets into the vascular system, the phloem and the xylem, then it's moved around in the tree. So it moves around. So you can prune out the dead branches that might save the tree, or it probably won't save the tree. It might slow the fungus down just a little bit, but you start continuing to get more dead branches and more dead branches. And once it gets on the trunk, just like this, it's terminal. There's no way to turn it around. Okay, still looking up. We're still in zone 3. We have woodpecker damage. And I'm not going to say damage. I'll just say you have woodpecker activity. How about that? I am a birder. And I get to do birding on the job. That's why I have really good binoculars. And I'm always curious when I see bird sign, like woodpeckers. And I will always get the homeowner and bring them over here and I'll ID the bird, and they don't even have to see the bird. So on the left side, you have the pileated woodpecker. Woody woodpecker was designed after this bird, but they didn't get the call right for woody woodpecker. It was a little bit, that was a little bit on the side there. These holes are random holes, pileated woodpecker. They're conical in shape, and they're big holes. Pileated woodpeckers really like ants. They sure do. And what they'll do is go peck, 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 and then they put their ear to the tree and they'll hear the insects moving around underneath the bark. And hey, there's the meal. And they'll go after the insect. Sometimes beetles will go after beetles and stuff like that. But ants is their specialty. Then on the right side, we have the yellow-bellied sapsucker. This is a smaller bird. And this one does horizontal holes. Very rarely does it kill a tree. If it's a fresh hole, it'll be light colored brown or reddish brown. If it's an old hole, then it'll be black. These are old holes. And what they do, their workflow is to do a line, and they'll come back in 2 days, and those holes will be filled with sap, and that's what they eat. And it might get a bonus if there's a bug eating the sap. That is bonus time, folks. That's right. A little extra on their food plate. And very rarely does it kill a tree. All right, we're now to zone 4. This is the crown of the tree. Okay. Okay, we're looking at the crown. And on the left side, we have a dead tree. And this is in the wintertime. As a tree guy, I used to drive around, and I'm looking for a tree that looks sort of like this one on the left side. Because when a tree dies, either in spring, summer, or the fall, when the leaves are on, then it disrupts the natural process called abscission. Here we go. Abscission. This is the process of the tree dropping leaves. I mean, the wind helps trees to drop their leaves, but it's actually a chemical process where the tree actually chemically releases a leaf. It's called abscission. So on a dead tree, on the left side, abscission doesn't occur because, hey, it's a dead tree. So in the wintertime, I can tell an oak tree is dead just by seeing a lot of brown leaves. And very often I would knock on the door and say, you have a dead tree, and they would not even know that the tree was dead. And on the right side, we have a maple tree, and we're looking at the crown, and surely you can see that on the left side, that's the dead side. The leaves turned out brown. And then on the right side, that's on the right side, that's the live side. Now on the oak trees, the southern red oaks sometimes will hold their leaves a little bit longer. Water oaks sometimes will sort of look like live oaks in the wintertime. Sometimes they'll hold their leaves for a long period of time. If you see green leaves up in the tree, don't worry about it. It's just a funky tree that's trying to be rebellious and being different from everybody else. And but if you have brown leaves, usually that means, unless it's a southern red oak, it usually means there's something's going on, and you want to take a closer look. Still looking in zone 4, looking up the tree. This is a widowmaker. A widowmaker is a broken branch, a hung branch. Sometimes dead branches fall from higher up and they get caught in the lower strata. And again, you want to think about target. So how important is it that you have a broken branch in a tree? Well, what's the target? What's it going to hit? Do people hang out underneath this tree? Is there a roof there? Is it a parking area right underneath the tree? The reason they call them widowmakers is because for lumberjacks, the timber people, out in the forest dropping trees, when they fell a tree, it brushes against other trees and breaks branches. And then as time goes by, they might be up there for a long period of time. And they call them widowmakers because they can fall out of the tree at any time. And so that's why they call them widowmakers. That's a forester's term.
They kill men.
Yeah, it kills loggers.
Makes
And
widows of their
yeah,
wives.
makes widows. Yeah, okay, widowmaker. Yeah, kills loggers from time to time. Okay. And then we're still in zone 4, we have canopy dieback. And as I look, this is a white oak. As I look at this tree here, I'm doing the detective work. I'm going like, why is this tree dying back? If you look down in the lower right-hand corner, you will see a brand new house. And right behind the mailbox, you will see a driveway. And so old trees don't do well when it comes to big changes. People like to have level yards. People like to scrape the surface and level it out and roll out the turf for that perfect yard. You got to understand that trees run most of the roots within 12 inches of the soil. They're usually more like 8 inches. The trees are right underneath the soil surface. And a lot of people think they go deep, 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 deep. No, they do not go deep, 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 deep. Why would you go deep? I mean, the soil around here is clay soil. They make bricks out of this stuff, right? And there's no moisture going deep. There's no nutrition. There's no organic matter. Why would a tree grow deep roots? They don't. They're very, very close to the surface. So on this one here, they built this beautiful house. They leveled out the soil. One pass of a heavy machine like a caterpillar or something like that, or a bulldozer, to level out the soil, will compact the soil. It'll break roots. It'll do all kinds of nasty things to those all important roots. So anyway, so that's why this tree is dying back. This tree has no chance of recovering. Eventually it'll die. It might take a few years. When you build a new house, you will know whether the trees are going to live or not within a 3-year period of time. It doesn't always happen suddenly. Usually it's a slow dieback, and that's usually the sign. So I've come to the end of my presentation here. If you want more information, treeinspection.com. If you want to become a tree climber, either recreational or you're thinking about entering the profession, we also run a tree climbing school, Tree Climbers International. School has been in existence for 35 years, injury-free school. There are now schools all over the world that came from our school. We trained a lot of people internationally. And tree inspection, we inspect people's trees for hazard and health. And we do that. That's something I really love to do. That's my second job. So if there's any questions, please ask away. I love answering questions.
Yeah, Peter, we have a few questions here. So going back to zone 1, when we were talking about mushrooms.
Yes.
Are mushrooms in the vicinity of the tree, but not visibly attached to the tree or roots, a sign of decay, like the chanterelles in the presentation?
No, they're harmless. If the tree is growing on a major root, the mushrooms growing on the major root or on the trunk itself, those are the bad ones. Once in a while, there'll be a mushroom, a few feet away. It's growing on a major root, but all those other mushrooms, totally harmless to trees.
Right. And then going back to zone 2, you were talking about how tulip trees, and lightning. So one person is asking, why do tulip trees carry more water?
It's just in the nature of the species. Tulip trees like to grow in wet areas near creeks. I can locate creeks. When I drive down the street, I can pretty accurately locate where the creeks are, where the drainage ditches and stuff are by the species of the tree. And tulip trees love large amounts of water. They grow in creek edge or in wet areas. And so it's just in the species. They just pull a lot more water than the oak trees do.
I see. Mm. So another participant is asking you to comment on a box elder with dead areas, but with new growth in other areas.
Okay, box elders are, they're a funky tree. They're in the maple family, and all the twigs are green. Really interesting. They're not what I call a landscape tree in the sense that they're not artistic and beautiful in the sense of they run a profusion of twigs and stuff. They're fairly common in Atlanta. Do what?
Refer people to our website.
Yeah, yeah, they're fairly common. At our website, treeinspection.com, go to that website, and there's a section called Atlanta Trees. And I've written up 55 species, 65, oh, good. 65 species of trees that I commonly see in Atlanta. And I talk about their different growth patterns. There's leaf samples there, bark pictures and stuff like that. There's a lot of information about those trees. There's also annoyance factors. All trees have annoyance factors. White oaks have big acorns. Sweet gum balls. Ooh, we all know about the annoyance factor of sweet gum balls. All trees have some annoyance factors, but I go over those. Some trees break branches more so than other trees. So please check out that.
Right. Another question here. Wondering about what remediation, if any, can be done for cankers or trunk cavities.
Okay, cankers, trunk cavities. Not much you can do for either one of them. In the old days, with cavities, we used to fill them with concrete. And a very invasive procedure. Nowadays, the scientists tell us, please don't fill concrete, because concrete as a filler is a rigid substance. It doesn't bend, it's not flexible. And 100 years ago, a lot of our legacy trees, really old trees that had cavities, were filled with concrete. That was a procedure we used to do a long time ago. And those legacy trees are now breaking in windstorms. And where are they breaking? They are breaking right on top of that concrete fill because of the sharp edges of the concrete, the very top of the fill. Some people, if you're going to do something, okay, this has got to do something with a cavity. You can spray it with foam, spray foam. Get the black foam. Don't get the orange one. It looks terrible. You can spray and fill that cavity. Some people want to fill where trunk unions are, where branches meet. There'll be a little water pocket there. I say leave the water for the birds. The water will inhibit fungi, but some people, they just got to have it filled. And I say, well, go for the foam, spray foam, and do it every other year, because the animals will chew into it and all that other stuff. But don't do anything. I mean, it is what it is. You have this. What I will say, if you have a cavity, you can stick a stick into that cavity and feel around. You don't have to have a special rod or anything like that. Feel around. If that cavity is really extensive, then you want to take a look at the target. If it fails, because it's going to be weak. If you have a cavity in a tree, that is a weak spot. If it fails, then you need to know what's going to hit. What you really should do is call an arborist. Okay, so it's one thing to do this yourself, but it's another thing to call a professional. If I had a cavity like that, I would probably feel around. If it's a small cavity, I would probably drill it with a resistograph. It's what they call a resistograph, to quantify how much decay is in the tree. And there's a certain percentage of decay which is tolerable, of missing supporting wood, and then there's levels. Anything over 33% loss of strength, now you're getting into a risk situation. And of course, I've seen some trees, some really big oak trees, small cavity at the very base. I stuck my rod in, and it turned out to be a really big cavity. I drilled the tree so I could actually get a mathematical equation of how much wood there really is. And I've been surprised on some really big, gigantic trees that there's, let's say, a 48-inch diameter oak tree. I've seen trees to where there's only 4 inches of green wood and all the rest is just airspace. And if there's a target, then of course that would be something to look at. But don't fill the cavity. Next.
Do carpenter ants ever kill the tree? Should you be concerned or take any actions to decrease carpenter ants in the tree?
Good question. Well, the carpenter ants are always going to be there, and you can prune out what they're in. If it's like dead branches and stuff like that, they call that crown cleaning. You can do that. If they're inside the tree, then spray, because they're inside, spray usually doesn't touch them, and doing an outside like a insect repellent spray, well, that's not going to do anything. Sometimes they're what we call, they don't eat live wood. They only eat dead wood. Remember that. They in the world of tree risk assessment, carpenter ants are considered indicators. They indicate that there's some decay or something's going on. I would drill with the resistograph around an ant colony just to see how deep they go. Sometimes it's just not too deep. Sometimes it's real deep. That's why I have the drill. It gives me a definitive answer as to how bad is it. So, by the way, the carpenter ant is great food. The pileated woodpecker loves carpenter ants. So anyway, I'm a birder. I have an excuse. So anyway, and I also want to say something about saving trees for habitat. I like dead trees as long as you keep in mind that if you have a dead tree, if it fails, what's it going to hit? Do you have room for this dead tree? If you have a dead tree inside a whole bunch of other trees that people don't hang out underneath, it's not, there's no pedestrian traffic. You might want to save that dead tree for habitat. That's where all the woodpeckers, and then you have all the other animals will use this tree as a habitat. So again, think about target. If you have a dead tree, is there target? Will it hit your house parking area? Do people hang out underneath there? Then yeah, you should take it down. Now, very often I will suggest to people, if they like wildlife, I say, do you like birds and wildlife and stuff like this? So I'll ask you while I'm on a tree inspection. They say, oh yeah, I really like that. And I said, well, you got this dead tree. Well, rather than removing it entirely, how about leaving a 10-foot trunk? And you can put bird houses on it, and then you can watch the fungus grow on it, and because all kinds of funguses will grow on a dead tree. And then the animals will come in and make holes and habitate. And so it's actually a plus as a habitat tree, but just make sure there's no target. Any other questions?
Yeah. Can pine bark beetles be treated by soil injections rather than spraying?
Soil injections don't work. Unless they come up with something new. That's soil injections, also known as drenching, works really good for the woolly adelgid. That's the one that attacks the hemlock trees. But the drench itself, you're talking about taking chemicals up and killing the insects via the vascular system. And I don't think that really works. Spraying the surfaces, yes, that does work. If it's not too late, if those beetles haven't really gotten inside the tree. But the soil drenches, they work for some insects, but not too good for your beetle borers. Also, too, I do want to mention fertilizing trees. I'm not a real big fan of fertilization of trees. I am a very big fan of mulching trees and watering trees, doing it naturally. You can do damage to trees by fertilizing them, especially with a high nitrogen content. It can actually make the soil hot. It's not good for some trees. So be careful when it comes to fertilization. I don't like tree injections where they stick tubes and for trees to uptake stuff. It's good for some things as an all-purpose insecticide. Soil trunk injections as an all-purpose insecticide. They're good for insects that munch on leaves, but not for insects that are in the trunk. And you have to think about how these chemicals work. Fertilization is a high profit business. So that's a lot of times they will talk you into doing stuff that you really don't need to do or may not want to do. Next question.
Any particular species prone to failure?
Oh, good question. Yes, I would say oak trees. Oak trees are prone to root rot. They're prone to trunk rot. And I'd say out of 100 trees, when I ran a tree service for 25 years. I was a lead climber. Most exciting thing I've ever done. Going up into a tree with a chainsaw. You will not be bored. I was certainly an adrenaline junkie, and that was a good place for me. And I worked on a lot of failed trees that fell down. And I'd say out of, and this is just sort of off the cuff, out of 100 trees that failed at ground level, I would say 85 to 90 of those trees are going to be oak trees. And because, again, they're very prone to root rot. I would say root rot's the biggest one that brings the oak trees down, and then also trunk rot, much more common. Pine trees very rarely fail. Pine trees are scary trees, okay, to a lot of people. I have a lot of people that talk about, I'm scared of my pine trees. And I say, well, why are you afraid of your pine trees? Says, well, they move around. Well, yeah, that's what they're supposed to do. Oak trees are stiff trees, and pine trees are flexible trees. Think of a pine tree like an antenna. They whip around. That is what they're designed to do. And I get lots of comments, you know, when I inspect trees, and say, I'm afraid of my pine trees. And I said, well, why are you afraid of your pine trees? He said, well, they're moving around. I said, well, gosh, you know, that's a good thing. If they didn't move around, they'd be on the ground. They're flexible trees. And I always have some coaching for the people, the pine phobic people. And I say, okay, hey, look, when the wind comes up, there's something you can do. And they say, what can I do? And I say, don't watch. I mean, it's common sense, you know, just don't watch. If it scares you, don't watch. Maybe have an arborist come out, you know, check your trees, make sure you don't have fusiform canker, you have some problems with the pine trees, identify the bad trees, and then just like, you know, don't watch, you know, that's what they're supposed to do. Anyway, sort of went off on a rant there. It always drives me crazy when people want to go on this, let's kill the pine trees, they're dangerous. Yeah, take them all down. You know, I said, why do you want to do that? You know, I'm afraid of them. Okay, anyway, I'm off the rant. Next question.
All right, there's a few questions about ivy and vines. So for example here, can ivy or vines growing up trees kill a tree? There's another question, can ivy growing on trees damage them?
Okay, very common question. All righty. I'm probably going to get in trouble here. Vines very rarely kill trees. Okay, trees Atlanta. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, I am opinionated. Okay, vines very rarely actually kill trees. So pines, vines, when they grow up a tree, they are not taking nutrients from the tree. Their nutrients are coming from the ground. Okay, how do you know this? If you were to, what is that?
Circumscribe.
Oh, circumscribe, use a handsaw, circumscribe the vines. Okay, at the base of a tree, you circumscribe and cut all the vines. You do one pass, drop down 2 feet, do the same thing. Don't use a chainsaw, a little bit too fast cutting. Much better to do it with a handsaw, a sharp handsaw at that. Yeah, you don't want to cut into the tree. Okay, so you circumcise it once, circumcise it twice, go down 2 feet. Then you use a crowbar, a flat bar, and you peel the sheet off the tree. And you will notice immediately, within 3 months, all the vine up above where you've done this action dies out. And this is proof that vine is not parasitic. It's not taking nutrients out of a tree. So now there's let me see, there's wisteria that grows up trees. There's English ivy, there's Irish ivy, then there's the bad boy, there's the poison ivy. By the way, poison ivy is easy to identify in the winter because the poison ivy shoots come off the trunk at a 90-degree angle. So even when the leaves are off, poison ivy, you can ID them. So if you're going to do this circumcising thing to cure the ivy on the trees, suit up. When I mean by suit up, wear a hat, long sleeve shirts, wear gloves, have a bottle of alcohol and a little bit of cotton swab right there, or ivy, they have special ivy off type stuff. And so when you work with ivy, because poison ivy likes to mix with the in Virginia creeper. Let's not forget Virginia creeper. But anyway, if you're going to do that ivy killing thing, do not pull the ivy off the tree unless you must have that outdoor workout. It is really hard to do, really hard. Pulling green ivy off a tree, very hard to do. Wait 3 years, the ivy will contract and you will just fall off the tree in big sheets. Don't try to pull ivy off the tree. So going back to ivy killing trees, the one ivy that does kill trees is kudzu. And that's the ivy, you're driving down the expressway and you see trees overgrown with kudzu. I call them the mummy trees. And what kills those trees is they capture all the sunlight and they starve the sunlight out from the tree. So those, yes, they do kill the tree. So anyway, yeah. Any other questions? So going back to the ivy, it's a nice thing to have the ivy off the tree. It's great for the appearance of the tree, but it's not a do or die. My tree will die if I have ivy on my tree. Don't be crazy. I mean, I've seen people that 1 or 2 strands of English ivy go on the tree. They'll apologize to me. Say, I'm so sorry. There's some ivy in my tree. So why are you sorry? But anyway, don't. It's not a big deal. Next question.
Yeah. Can you talk a little about what to do when 2 different trees are either growing into each other or adversely affecting the tree's growth direction?
Okay, 2 different species of trees.
Growing into each other.
Or just 2 different trees?
It just says 2 different trees are either growing into each other or affecting the tree's growth direction.
Doesn't matter what species.
Okay, doesn't matter about species. Okay, trees adapt to each other. So sometimes trees, squirrels and birds are our main tree planters. So sometimes trees grow close into each other, and trees will adapt to each other. So let's say you have a right and a left tree. Okay, you got two trees that are growing real close together. If you look at the branch growth on these two trees, you'll notice the tree on the right is growing most of its branches out to the right side. Why is it doing that? Because that's where the sunlight is. Okay, and then the tree on the left is growing its branches out to the left. Trees will adapt to each other. Now, trees that are rubbing against each other, that's a little bit different story. But trees adapt to each other. One tree on the right side might lean out to the right side. Why? Because that's where the sunlight is. The tree on the left might lean out or grow its branches to the left side. Why? Because that's where the sunlight is. Now, if you took one of those trees out, okay, and you say, oh, I'm going to give this other tree some room to grow, just know that the tree you take down, whether at the right or left, what happens after you've done that, now you have one tree that's really one-sided. Okay, so if you can deal with the one-sidedness of that one tree, and you feel good about taking down the one tree so the other tree can grow, you will have probably for many, many, many years a one-sided tree. So the trees will adapt to each other, so they're not going to take nutrients from each other. They're not going to compete for sunlight. That's why the branches are growing in opposite directions. There's a thing called canopy shyness. So let's take a look at, let's think about the rainforest. Let's take a walk in the woods or in the rainforest or something like that. Very few people ever look up. I encourage you, next time you're in a forest, to look up and sort of scope out the canopy and how the trees have positioned themselves in the canopy. Trees do not grow branches into neighboring trees. There's always a 3-foot clearance. It's called canopy shyness. There's always a 3-foot clearance between one tree's foliage and another tree's foliage. And this could be like a really tight packed forest. This could be the rainforest in the Amazon. There's always a 3-foot distance between these trees. Why is there a 3-foot distance of that nature? When a tree moves around in the wind, it needs room to move. It doesn't want to touch another tree, because when it touches another tree, it creates a wound. And it's unneighborly to slap your neighbor. Okay, trees know this. Okay, so it's called canopy shyness. So when I'm looking at leaning trees, I'll look up there and I'll look at the canopy, and I'm going to look at the canopy shyness between opposite the lean. Is there like 3 or 4 feet clearance between that lean and the next tree? Then I'll know that that tree is not in the process of falling over. It's phototropic. That's the fancy word that was on my test. Phototropic. It's going for the sunlight. So most people don't read the canopy, but they will make room for each other. They will naturally do that. You don't have to prune the trees to make room for each other. They will naturally do that. Next question.
Yes. Are river birches naturally messy with dropped branches?
Bradford pears.
Yeah, they are. They drop lots of twigs and they drop bark. As a kid, I have to mention this. As a kid, I used to write love letters on the back of river birch bark. I used to peel them off in sheets, and I'd write little cute letters, and I'd give them to the girls. Yes, that's in that's in the annoyance factor of trees. River birches. The river birches often run multiple trunks. Sometimes they split apart. You can cable them together. That's something you can do. Some people like river birches. Professionally. Cables are always placed 2/3 of the way up the tree, not down low, way up where the leverage factor is. Professionals. You'd want professionals to do that. And then there's, of course, the scourge, the Bradford pear, which has a terrible reputation for splitting apart because their trunk unions are always tight V's, and the branches go all the way to the top. So one branch peels off a Bradford pear. Now you have this one-sided, ugly tree where you usually take the tree down. So anyway, but yeah, river birches do that naturally.
There's another question about mushrooms. What about mushrooms growing on the limbs of a tree?
If they're up in the tree and growing on big limbs, yes, that is of concern. You know, it will be on the bigger wood. That means there's decay is present, and that would be a weak section of the tree. So yes, call an arborist. Very often, sometimes I will climb the tree, I will drill the tree, I will do an aerial drill, aerial inspection. Sometimes I do that. I don't do it all the time, but sometimes I'll do that to quantify how much the decay there is. But if you see mushrooms growing off the trunk or off big branches and stuff like that, that's an indicator of weakness, and it needs to be investigated, possibly pruned. So yes, that's not a good sign.
Yeah, another question, what is the best website to use to determine what type of tree you're looking at or other vegetation around your house? I'm trying to determine native versus invasive.
Walter Reeves has something for tree ID. Of course, we have the
Section on our website.
yeah, on our website, treeinspection.com. Atlanta trees, we have 65 species written up. Those 65 species are the most common species of trees. So you, that's the native trees, mostly the native trees. So
Don't know about websites. Sorry, can't help with that.
yeah, there's lots of websites. Just Google it, tree ID. But when you Google tree ID, you want to tell them Southeast. If you're in the Southeast, of course we're in the Southeast. Tree IDs, Southeast region, because there are books. There are
Wherever
books.
you are, we have people here from the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah. So, yeah, go regional with your IDs, and there's of course all kinds of books. Trees of the Southeast, landscape trees. When you're talking, you know. Special landscape trees, that's a whole different tree species list.
Yeah, at treesatlanta.org, we also have some under resources. You'll find some good resources and articles on how to identify trees and invasive species too.
Excellent.
Okay, can you comment on a Deodora cedar that is half dead, top half? And, and it continues, bottom half showing new growth every year. It is a 14-footer, was planted in our property 5 years ago as a mature tree.
Okay. Call us. I probably need to take a look at it. Something's going on to have half the trees dead on one side. I would look on the side, on the dead side, I'd look for borers, signs of borers, frass and stuff like that. And generally when half a tree dies out, that's not a good sign. So yeah. I would look for insects on that side of the tree. Mechanical damage, if they put in pipes and stuff like that and cut roots, that'd be another thing to look at.
All right, so we have 8 more questions and we're running, we're getting closer to the end of the event, but Peter, would you stay and answer the questions?
Of course.
Sure, perfect. I have seen cables run between 2 trees leaning in opposite direction. Is this helpful?
Probably not, because you're talking about lots of weight. I would probably say not too helpful. The trees are leaning away from each other, probably for sunlight purposes. Some people are just nervous about cable, are nervous about leaning trees. I don't suggest it.
Okay, are you currently teaching tree climbing classes during the COVID-19?
Call us.
Call us. Call us.
We're teaching tree worker classes and the basic tree climbing course, yes. But we are following very strict COVID-19 guidelines.
All right.
Yes.
Great. Another question here. I have trees popping all over my yard. Please advise.
Tree what?
Trees popping up, trees sprouting
Popping.
up all over your yard.
Yes.
That means wherever they're coming from, they're doing a good job. They're propagating. Squirrels are big tree planters. Birds are birds and bird poop, big tree planters. So I don't know how I can advise you. If you can't stand them, mow them down. If you really want to get on your hands and knees, you can pull it up. Probably more will come up. That means good soil. By the way, that means good soil. That is a good sign. So that's just what trees do, depending on the species of tree.
Yeah, and you talked about birds before, and this question is, what are your top trees to plant to benefit birds and wildlife?
Oh, boy, that's a good one.
Ouch. So many choices. Mulberry's a good one for fruits. Some people hate mulberries. That's a red mulberry, is the indigenous species. There's a white mulberry. However, when it comes black cherry, small cherry, that's small cherry fruit. When it comes to that kind of a fruit, know that all your fruits have citric acid. So if you're going to plant that kind of a tree, make sure it's not near a parking area, because citric acid will take paint right off the car. And of course, there's the bird poop. So just think about if birds are coming to your tree, just make sure that the fallout, you're clear of the fallout. Nutting trees, pecan trees, of course, is good for squirrels if you're into raising the squirrels. Yeah, and location, you want to think, whenever you think about planting a tree, all trees, when they're young, they're like babies. They're small and innocent. But look down the road, let's say 50 years later, and do you want this big giant tree growing like right next to your house? So always think about what the mature tree is going to look like. And if it's going to be feeding birds and stuff, be it nuts, be it fruits and stuff like that, again, think about a mature tree. I mean, a baby tree, harmless. A mature tree might be something different.
All right, so another question. People want to cut trees next to driveways because they think their roots might be the cause their driveways are cracking. Is this true? And is there an alternative solution?
It is true. If you have a tree right next to a driveway, the trees will grow, very often will grow roots underneath the driveway. And as the roots get larger, they very slowly lift the concrete. Yes, that is true. So, and that is a good reason to remove a tree. If it's like really close, like within inches of a driveway, yeah, that is a good reason. There is a thing called a root barrier. You can protect your driveways. It's 36-inch diameter. You trench right next to the driveway. You trench a narrow hole. You drop down. A root barrier is thick plastic, and you dig this trench. Cut the roots with sharp tool, either a handsaw or pruning saw. Don't leave raggedy cuts, and you can put down a root barrier. So when the roots return, and they will grow back from those cuts, then they'll come against the root barrier, and you can sort of slow down the root growth. A lot of people will replace the driveway, and you can accommodate tree roots by using root barriers and stuff like that. Driveways do get old, and tree roots will break driveways, but also too, the ground settles underneath the driveway, causing cracks and stuff like that. So it's not always on the trees. But if you are going to put in a driveway near a tree that you want to keep, the further away from the tree, the better. Maybe reroute the driveway a little bit better. You know, to get away from tree, like if it's a really a big old mature trees. Always remember, mature trees don't adapt as well as younger trees. So anyway, remember too, trees do add value to your property. So when you start taking trees down indiscriminately, you are taking a lot of value away from your property. So we do appraise values of trees, and you would be surprised how much a big oak tree could be worth tens of thousands of dollars in property value to your land, to your home. So again, trees do have value. So there are ways to work with the driveway. You might get some consultation, some help on that, and save the trees if you can.
All right, so it's 11:30. We have 7 more questions. We will stay here answering the questions. If you cannot stay, we will definitely send everybody the recording of this presentation. So you'll be able to hear the rest of the answers here. But thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. We had a very good crowd, a very interactive, asking a lot of questions, which is great. And thank you, Peter, for your time, and Patty.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
It was great. It was fun.
Yeah, so let's go and continue, keep answering the questions.
And I can give you 10 more minutes because
Okay.
I want to get a haircut in a few minutes, and my hair, I'm so ready for a haircut.
All right, so we will go fast with the questions. A neighbor has a lovely, very tall, maybe 60 to 70 feet tulip poplar, about 20 to 30 feet from their house. She's nervous it will fall on the house. It is a healthy tree. She's considering topping the tree. Does this make sense?
Okay, call us for that. You need us to come out and take a look to tell you whether you have
Tree topping is illegal.
Yeah, tree topping is not a good thing. No, that's very bad for a tree. You either kill it or you weaken it. So tree topping is a big no-no. In fact, it's illegal in the city of Atlanta. Top your trees. It's considered destroying your trees. As for tulip trees, very rarely fail at the ground. They're not prone to decaying out like the oak trees are. They don't get root rot. They don't get root rot at all. So anyway, call us. We'll look at the tree. I might drill the tree a few times. I'll tell you whether it's a dangerous tree.
There's a section on our website, on the treeinspection.com website called Advice. And we have a whole section on you and your neighbors. And we talk in good detail about how to deal with your neighbors, either about a problem that the both of you have with the shared tree, or a problem that you have with your neighbor's tree, or any number of quandaries that you might be facing as a homeowner. So you might want to check that out.
Yeah, and you mentioned oak trees, and somebody's asking, do they fall break or do they uproot?
I would say the biggest cause of failure would be uprooting, because of root rot. With oak trees, it's root rot. That's the biggest thing with oak trees. And usually you'll see mushrooms and stuff growing around the base of the tree. Not always. I'm more prone to drill an oak tree with a resistograph to see what's inside the tree. I would do that. Southern red oak, the red oak family trees are more prone to failure than the white oak family. There's white oaks and red oaks.
Red oaks look healthy.
Yeah.
A question about the ambrosia beetle. Will an ambrosia beetle infestation always be indicated by the sawdust matchsticks, or does that symptom depends on the tree species?
Sawdust matchsticks is the best way to ID the ambrosia beetle. However, if you had a rainstorm the night before, those toothpicks, we call them toothpicks, those toothpicks will disappear. Those toothpicks are really fragile. You just touch them, they just sort of disintegrate. So if you catch them at the right time, yeah, it's the toothpicks is the positive ID for ambrosia beetle.
Okay, I have an a wisteria tree. Is it poison for dogs? Poisons for dogs?
Dogs.
Oh, wisteria tree poison for dogs. I have no idea. Don't know. Google that. There we go. Google it. I have no idea.
Okay. So this is a question about carpenter ants. So we have a red maple with 6 multiple trunks spreading in 6 different directions from a short main trunk juncture. One trunk, which has had 2 large limbs removed, has a big carpenter ant infestation and a bad area above it with sipping sap where a limb has been cut. I was advised the trunk should be removed and the remaining crown cut back 20 to 25 feet. But
Call us on that. Let us take a look at that.
Yeah.
The 25%. Yeah, that's a rule. Pruning. Don't cut more than 25% out. If you have a trunk that's heavily infected with carpenter ants and it's down near where the trunk union is, yeah, you might want to take that section out.
Mm-hmm. And then I have a black fungus at the base of my hackberry. What might that be?
Don't know.
Depends on what it looks like.
Yeah, it depends on what it looks like. Funguses, as they grow older, some of them turn black. When they're fresh, they're a different color. I'd have to take a look at what it looks like to be able to tell you on that.
Okay, and I believe this is the last question. Can you comment on mushrooms popping up in a front yard, several yards away from a tree? Are these mushrooms in the lawn likely harming a pecan tree nearby?
No. Mushrooms in the lawn have no effect on trees. Do not worry. That's a whole different species set of mushrooms are out in the yard. No, those are the ones that do not attack trees. We call them the LBMs, the little brown mushrooms. They're really hard to ID and very rarely do they attack trees.
All right, so I think that's it. That's all the questions we have so far. If there's any other questions, please type it in the chat. And thank you, Peter, for all this. We definitely learned a lot.
Oh, great. It was fun for me. Thank you so much.
All right, so I think that's all the questions we have. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And thank you, Peter and Patty. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.